So your sound comes through great. I mean, you might still have the issue, obviously, like you've always said about, but at least we can hear the. Welcome back to Poutine Politics, Canadian issues served with cheese curds. My name's Adam.
My name is Mike.
It's been a few weeks since Mike and I have actually had the opportunity to sit down and record a new episode. So I figured we'd do a little bit of an update of what's been going on around the country, because there's been some things happening. Obviously, the COVID-19 shutdown is still a thing in a lot of places, although there's some provinces that are starting to open up. I didn't feel like I was going to linger on that stuff because businesses are opening up. That's good. But
yes,
we need to be careful because we don't all want to get shut down again. The businesses that are opening up right now don't want to get shut down again. So we just need to be smart about how we're handling things. So instead of looking at, oh, well, New Brunswick's doing this and Saskatchewan's doing this and Ontario's doing this. So we're going to start from the left coast. We're going to start with British Columbia. Now, I decided not to focus with British Columbia. I decided not to focus on any of the COVID news because they're doing quite well, and I figure, okay, I think most people know that they're doing quite well. What I did find, though, I believe it was over this past week, was that the Vancouver City Council voted and approved a 7% property tax hike for 2020.
What? Why?
Because they're going to have a big budget shortfall.
That came out of nowhere.
Oh yeah, considering this is something apparently they just voted on relatively recently, 7% average property tax hike for 2020. So I did a few comparisons, okay, for the comparison to show how much of a difference this is. So in the last 3 years, here was the property tax hikes in those 3 years: 3.9%, 4.24%, and 4.5%. So in 1 year, they went from a 4.5% property tax jump to a 7% property tax jump.
Well, it's just on course for them being taxed. I don't know. Why are they taxing so... all right, never mind. Vancouver's an infinite well of awesome that I haven't even explored yet. But
okay, hold on, though. I have even more comparisons. Toronto, their property tax jump for 2020 is 4.25%, and Montreal is 2.1%.
Now, when you say property tax jump, like, is that the increase in how much they're actually taxing, or the amount of money that they're bringing in?
No, the amount that they would be taxing per property. So so in this case, with the 7% increase, it's not going to sound like a lot when I say it, but I mean it depends on the person. So for every $1,000 of property tax that you pay, your property tax will be $70 higher than it was last year.
Okay, so it is. So, well, then it's not as bad, because if you look at, well, the weird part about it is that, okay, so there's two, so if you look at it from the standpoint of, yeah, your property taxes are going up, but oftentimes a lot of these places, their property value has gone up exponentially too.
Right.
So the property taxes don't actually reflect that property value going up?
I guess yes and no. Like, you have to think in Ontario as well, we have the whole MPAC assessment situation, right? So in that case, your property gets assessed at a certain value, and they're like, okay, we're going to increase the property value to that over the next 4 years. So the thing is that not only do you pay an increased property tax amount each year that the value of the property goes up based on the MPAC assessment, but you also get the increase that the city has voted on. So you're kind of getting not a double increase, but you're getting two different levels to the increasing, because you're getting an increase to the value of the property, which gets taxed based on the mill rate, and then you get the increase that your municipality's voted on.
Right.
So in this case, like let's say, especially in Vancouver, where properties have been stupid, some of these properties that are selling for multi-million dollars that, look worse than my house is, it's like a 7, not only if the property tax assessment has been increasing to catch up with what property sales have been like, and they get the 7% property tax hike in 1 year. That could be pretty substantial for the wrong people.
Oh, for sure.
I don't feel bad for all of those people that own empty properties, but I do feel bad for the people that actually live there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So then to go along with that very quickly, in the same vein of obviously Vancouver is struggling for money, the budget for the police department is also being cut by $3.5 million. Which, when I looked at what their budget is not a lot. It's like 1%. But it was it was cut in a closed door meeting of the finance committee. So it wasn't even voted on. The police department wasn't aware of it. It was just, oh, by the way, we're taking this money out of your budget.
Amazing.
Good job, guys.
Perfect. 10 out of 10.
All right, Alberta. Our friends in the UCP are up in arms because the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund has decided to divest from certain companies that are operating in the Canadian oil sands. Those companies include Imperial Oil, Canadian Natural Resources, Suncor, and Cenovus. And, of course, Jason Kenney got mad and had to, during one of his press conferences, had to say that Norway's a bunch of hypocrites because they're divesting from Canadian oil, but they're exploring new oil resources offshore and blah, 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 this and that. And when you read the actual release, in not directly from the fund themselves, but from other maybe not quite as biased news sources as a UCP press conference, you find out that they're divesting from oil and gas companies that don't have a renewable sector as a part of their business.
Oh, so it's not that they're doing it from Alberta; they're doing it because of Alberta's policies.
Pretty much. So, for instance, the fund still has investments with BP and with Shell, but those are two businesses that, while they are in the oil and gas sector, also have a renewables part of their business.
Right.
Now, the other reason why I wanted to dig into this a little bit further is because we can do an actual comparison of how well this Norwegian fund has been doing in comparison to Alberta's fund, because surprise, surprise, they both have something very similar. So the Norway Sovereign Wealth Fund is a pension fund. So money from non-renewable resources gets invested into this fund, and it gets invested in real estate, in stocks and bonds, in things that you can invest in, right? Norway created created the fund back in 1990, and they made their first deposit into the fund in 1996. So 24 years this thing has been around. Its value at the end of 2019 was $1.2 trillion US. As a comparison, the Alberta Heritage Savings Trust Fund, which we've talked about before, which was established in 1976, the first deposits to that fund also happened at the same time. The guidelines behind that was that 30% of non-renewable resource revenue was going to go into this fund. So what was it worth at the end of 2019?
I have no idea.
$18 billion.
Oh.
So for a fund that has been around almost twice as long as the one for Norway, and it is worth almost 1/100th of the Norwegian fund.
Then listen. It's not because they've had issues where they've taken losses through corporations or anything like that. That's not the reason why. It's not because they've had scandal after scandal. That's not the reason why. It's because of superior management from progressive right-wing parties in Alberta. That's why.
Yes. Well,
wait, no, that's not why.
No, that's really not why.
Mysterious.
I was going to say, considering the fact that there was also a story that came out sometime in the last few weeks where the managers at the Alberta Heritage Fund, or I guess it was the Alberta Investment Management Corporation or something like that. It's called AIMCO. They lost. Yeah. Apparently, they lost $4.4 billion on a risky deal.
Yeah, I heard about that one.
Yeah, okay.
It was good. Job well done, boys.
That's right.
They didn't bail out. They didn't bail out an oil company from having to pay the money that they owed. That's not what they did.
No,
that's not at all.
No, of course not. I mean, when you do look at the information in regards to the Alberta Heritage Savings Trust Fund, they do say, well, the money goes towards healthcare and towards education and things like that. It's like, well, I don't think it's doing that right now. considering how public the cuts to education and healthcare and things like that have been in the last couple of years in Alberta, something tells me that the money from that fund is really not going towards those things.
Exactly.
And even still, I mean, guys, this thing has been around for 45 years almost, and it's only worth $18 billion. And Norway was able to build a value of over $1 trillion in half the time.
Exactly.
Let me see. The Alberta Ministry of Health continues to attack doctors.
Oh, Jesus, Murphy.
Yeah. So not
how does that guy still have a job?
Well,
I mean, I know exactly why, Jason Kenney, but like any other politician that would do something as outlandish as what that guy did would be forced to resign or be fired.
Yeah. Well, you already gave the answer.
I'm not yeah, I know Jason Kenney, but like how has other politicians, and I don't mean like Notley obviously has been furious about this, but like I'm talking about Andrew Scheer, anybody that's running for the PC leadership, or anyone else outside of anybody in the Liberal Party, just like in the federal Liberals, just gone, this person needs to be fired.
Yeah.
Like you can't have this. It's so fundamentally crazy that this person needs to be fired, and like nothing.
Yep.
Nothing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, yeah. That's just the way it is, right? That's just the way it is. So, Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan was one of the first provinces to start reopening businesses. So good for Saskatchewan. They've had relatively low numbers of cases of COVID-19. However, Saskatchewan just recently reported their first case of the hantavirus for 2020.
The what?
The hantavirus.
What the heck is that?
You don't know what the hantavirus is?
No.
Oh, hold on. I've heard of it. I have heard of it before. So anyone who comes into contact with rodents that carry hantavirus is at risk of HPS. Rodent infestation in and around the home remains the primary risk for hantavirus exposure. Even healthy individuals are at risk for infection if exposed to the virus. So watch out for mice and mouse droppings and nests and things like that. Don't get bit by one because it might not just be rabies that you have to worry about.
God damn.
Now, apparently, from reading the article I did about it, I think it's over the last 20 years. There's only been like 35 cases of it in, I think, the province. So again, it's not like this is a major thing, but I thought it was just, I'm going through Saskatchewan. I'm like, I'm really not finding anything. And then I found that article. I'm like, this is what I'm talking about. So in the midst of a pandemic, they've got another virus that's about to take off. And it's like, well, no, it's not really going to take off, but whatever.
And I want to say while we're here, I want to say the mistake that I made with the coronavirus wasn't that I was wrong about numbers or anything like that.
Yeah.
I was wrong about how contagious it was.
Right.
Which is why you should always talk to an expert about things like this.
Yes.
I'm not an epidemiologist. I've never studied it. I should have been more cautious about what I was saying because I hadn't done the research. Now, I believe I prefaced that, but I still should have been more cautious.
Fair enough.
Just like now, like we both will say the chances that I know of with the hantavirus, is that what we're calling it, are probably pretty low for contagiousness. But
well, yes, it's because I'm actually on the Health Canada website right now, and it does say, with the exception of the Andes hantavirus, which I imagine is only specific to the Andes region of South America, the virus does not spread through person-to-person contact. So.
Okay, so it can only be transmitted from a mouse to a human as opposed to a human to a human.
However, do you want to know how you can get it?
No.
So, no, you don't. Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you anyways. You can inhale virus particles from rodent urine, droppings, or saliva. Okay. This can happen when rodent waste is stirred up from vacuuming or sweeping. Touch objects or eat food contaminated with the urine, droppings, or saliva of infected rodents. Or are bitten by a rodent infected with a hantavirus. Although apparently being bitten by a rodent infected is very rare.
Yeah, because who gets bitten by a mouse?
Well, exactly. So just don't eat anything that's got mouse pee on it.
Okay.
That's all. Manitoba. Okay, so I don't know. There's probably stuff going on in Manitoba. I couldn't find anything relatively interesting. So All I covered there was that as of May 15th, they had gone 4 days with no new cases.
Good job.
Good job. All right. Good job, Manitoba. Now I'm going to skip Ontario for now. As you've noticed, I've been coming from the West Coast, but I'm skipping Ontario for now because it's where we live, and there's a little more to talk about. Quebec is going to release a budget update 2 months after their original budget was released. They are expecting now that instead of having a budget surplus, as they had originally determined before COVID-19, that they will have a deficit this year of somewhere between $12 to $15 billion, and it may go more than that.
Par for the course, understandable. I'm not gonna hold their feet over fire for this one.
That's right, exactly. And then, what was it? Elementary schools and daycares and things like that were supposed to be opening in Quebec, or are supposed to be opening in Quebec, I believe, this coming week. So I think it's after the Victoria Day holiday. But as it stands right now, they are delaying it for at least a week in the Montreal area, and it's possible that they could delay it a little longer because based on current public health projections, based on opening up everything the way that they're planning on, the models are showing that they could experience up to 150 deaths per day from COVID-19 by July if they don't continue with their isolation measures as they are.
Listen, I have a 7-year-old. I have an 11-year-old. I know how hard it has been for my 7-year-old to understand that she can't just hug everyone that she sees, so to speak. So, like, we've had the social distant family visits where, like, my family has come over, they're in their car, and my daughter wants to go up and hug them because that's what she always does. Mm-hmm. She's that type of kid. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, you're just not going to get these kids to not transmit. They just don't have the awareness or understanding to not transmit disease. So opening schools is catastrophically a bad idea. You're putting people, doesn't matter if they're kids or not, it's worse with kids, but you're putting people in such small confined quarters. All it takes is one kid to bring it to that school, to bring it to the school, and the entire school can be infected.
Yep.
And they're bringing it back home. This is terrible. How are you trying to say me that a person can't go to the nail salon, but they can send their kids to school? Now, I get it that there's parents that are struggling. Mm-hmm. I get it that, like, they're in huge financial positions where they're very vulnerable, and it's very unfortunate they can't go back to work. Things like 100%, I get that. But as the governor of New York famously said, what's worse than death? Yeah,
exactly. Right? Exactly.
Like, when Cuomo said that, I was like, you're genius. Like, it's death. There's nothing worse than death. If you can show me something worse than death, show me. Maybe your kid can come back to a healthy household. So that way, if your kid gets infected, your kid's going to bring it back to a healthy household and it's not going to impact you. But there are families, mine in particular, where if they were to do the same mandate for our province, my kid's not going to school.
Yeah.
They can't. I can't afford them the risk.
New Brunswick.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. New Brunswick. So a couple of quick parts here. So now New Brunswick, as of the 15th of May, had gone 9 straight days with no new cases. So kudos to New Brunswick.
Yep.
You know, I know how much you love New Brunswick, so
I love the Atlantic provinces. They're so much fun.
Yes. And apparently their risk of spring flooding has also receded. I guess they're reducing the funding to the flood watch because the expectation is that there will be no floods.
Well, that's good to hear.
That is very good to hear. Considering the fact that the last 2 years, apparently, 2 years in a row, they had historic floods.
Yeah, like 100-year floods, yeah.
Yes.
Nothing to do with climate change. I forgot about that.
No,
that's right.
No. But here's what is happening. What has been happening in New Brunswick. So New Brunswick, the provincial government had decided that they were banning the use of temporary foreign workers.
Okay.
And they expect that those that are unemployed will fill the positions that those temporary foreign workers would have filled.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, I just laughed there. Did I?
Good luck with that. So, in particular, in the CBC news story that I read, there's a company called Westmoreland Fisheries. So, what they're doing at their lobster processing plant, because apparently now is the time for lobster processing, they're expecting to rely on high school and middle school children to fill the positions that they would normally fill with foreign workers.
Oh, great, even better. Let's not bring in to take their jobs. Let's child labor laws. Perfect.
Exactly. They will pay the middle schoolers $13 an hour, and they will pay the high schoolers $15 an hour. The concern is that because
they're kids.
Well, no, I mean the concern, I guess, from the companies in regards to the foreign worker thing is that while New Brunswick banned the use of foreign workers, surrounding provinces didn't. So Nova Scotia didn't. It doesn't look like Prince Edward Island or Newfoundland did. Ontario definitely hasn't, although a different industry, right? It's different farming.
Yeah, it's not the same. Yeah,
right, because this is fisheries. But what's happened apparently is that, say, quite a number of those workers that they would normally get in New Brunswick have gone and taken jobs in other provinces, and the worry is that even after this is done, they may not get those workers back.
Yeah.
But that doesn't necessarily justify, the child labor.
It's a broken business model that we should definitely look at another time. But yeah.
Yeah.
If your only business model is to rely on kids or foreign workers, you have a bad business model and you need to fix it. Not give exceptions. You need to promote the idea of fixing the business model. And I don't necessarily fault the company, because if the company, they're trying to survive. Mm-hmm. So this is a government regulation that needs to be changed.
Yep,
but
absolutely.
That's, like I said, that's a story to get into later.
Now,
child should not be used.
Yeah,
children.
What's interesting about that? Hold on, I'm gonna pull up.
Although I did start working when I was 15, so who am I to talk?
That's yeah. I mean, anyways, go child labor. Woohoo!
Right.
when you consider the fact that in some provinces middle school starts at grade 7.
Yeah, right? Like, that's my daughter.
Yeah.
Next year.
Yeah, exactly.
Go work. She wanted to go to work. She's like, hey, can I make some money? I'm like, yeah, go find a job.
Yeah.
Wait, I have to go find a job? I'm like, yeah, I'm not paying.
That's how it works around here, don't you know? Nova Scotia cottagers are upset that they can't go to their New Brunswick cottages.
Oh, because they can't travel province by province.
Right, because New Brunswick has their borders closed to non-essential traffic. And so the funny thing about reading the story, though, was like there's some people that are like, if I'm standing at the border between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, I can see my cottage, and I'm not allowed to go to it. And it's like, yeah, because that's what the rules are that are in place right now. You can't go to your cottage because it's non-essential travel. Imagine that. I mean, I've had this quote unquote conversation with some people online. And their argument is the whole, well, they pay property taxes there. They should be able to use their properties. And I'm like, you're right, but this is extenuating circumstances.
My counter argument always to that is, okay, I pay property taxes. Does that mean I can have toxic waste in my backyard?
Yeah, exactly.
Because listen, it's the same thing. I could be infecting your yard because of what I'm doing in my yard.
Yep.
You want to minimize travel. You want to minimize people going from place to place, because the more people travel, the more likely they are to spread the disease.
Yeah, exactly.
That's just law of large numbers, right?
Yep.
You increase the risk. So that's why you can't. One of the easiest ways to prevent people from traveling is just close the borders.
Yeah.
Problem solved. Well, not problem solved, but like you've taken one less thing. Like, we would have loved to go and see my wife's family. Because they're in a different province, but we couldn't because the borders are closed.
Prince Edward Island. So again, there wasn't a ton of stuff in regards to PEI other than I guess their legislature is planning on resuming in-person sitting as of May 26th, and it will be the entire legislature, although it's, I guess, a little bit easier for them because there are only 27 MLAs, so it's not a large number of people, and They've rearranged the space within the building to allow 27 people to be in the legislature chamber and be physically distanced.
Couldn't they just get microphones and go to a field?
Yeah, or I mean, again, with 27 people, a Zoom meeting is even more possible.
Yes, but Zoom is not secure, and I would not trust it for the life of me. So,
I agree.
Zoom. I wouldn't use Zoom. I would use something else. But yes,
yeah.
Zoom-like meeting, yeah.
That's right. You could use something like that. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've heard the stories of, people like crashing Zoom meetings and stuff like that. Yes, it's not great.
Of the places that you want to have the most professionalism, a provincial legislator sit-in is one of the ones where you don't want to have some random person coming in.
Yeah, exactly.
But I still say they could go to a field with megaphones and be fine.
Yes, exactly. There are places like that in PEI. PEI is very lovely.
Oh yeah, for sure.
but,
You can walk on the sand and make squeaky noises.
That's right. That's right. We took a little bit of sand, even though there's signs telling you that you're not supposed to. So shh, don't tell anybody.
It'll be our secret. Is that what it's
that's right. Hey, if I cut it from the episode, it'll be our secret, right?
Unless you're a Patron.
Unless you're on Patreon.
God, that was a shameless plug that you're setting it for. Okay.
Newfoundland and Labrador. Newfoundland and Labrador. Hear the band in Newfoundland. So what did we have here? So again, I guess in their case for COVID-19, as of the 16th of May, they have gone 9 straight days with no new cases as well. So yay for Newfoundland. I mean, kind of like PEI, it probably helps that, you know, a good chunk of your province and a good chunk of your population is on an island.
Very much so. And Labrador is basically its own island too.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. There is road access, but it's like one road.
Yeah, that's right.
So the other thing apparently was there's a hydroelectric dam that's been getting built at
yes.
Muskrat Falls. You've heard about this?
Yeah, it's on my list.
Okay, so anyways, there was an inquiry into this thing that started in 2017, and the report was released back in March. So this project had been approved by the government in 2012, with an initial budget of $7.4 billion. So at this time, since the report was released, the budget has increased to $12.7 billion. The dam is still not done. I guess the executives involved in the project had concealed information that would undermine the business case of this dam, and this information was not reported to the public. And now, as a result, the inquiry report has been handed over to the police and the Justice Department for possible criminal and civil cases.
It wouldn't be Newfoundland if it was.
Yeah,
if it wasn't any other way.
Yeah.
There's a lot in there. There's a lot more that you just dug up.
Oh yeah, I imagine there is.
Talk about.
I imagine, and that's why I was like, when I started looking at it and I looked at it for like 5 minutes, I'm like, this could be a topic on its own, guaranteed.
Oh yeah,
guaranteed.
This sounds like a mic topic if I ever saw it.
Yes, exactly. So anyway, that happened back in March. I guess the report happened back in March. So that was two months ago, which, you know, sounds like old news at this point. But considering that the circumstances obviously are still going on there, and the people of the province have probably spent a lot of taxpayer money in order to get this thing built, it's probably not going to end up well. Like a lot of things.
No.
Like a lot of things.
Not for Newfoundland. It usually doesn't end up well with large projects.
No. We're getting closer. We're getting closer. So, to the territories. Nunavut. This was kind of interesting. So, the government of Nunavut apparently spent about $4 million to set up isolation hubs in other areas of the country so that citizens of Nunavut would be able to isolate without having to come home.
Okay.
So I guess apparently it was things like renting hotel rooms and things like that. But basically spending money to set up places. Now, in particular, the article that I read mentioned in Ottawa, Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Yellowknife. But it was making sure that there were places that were paid for by the government of Nunavut, set aside, so that it was something like just over 1,000 people of Nunavut that were not living there right now, but it would give them an option to be able to self-isolate. I amazed that they were that proactive and had the ability to do that. Like, I mean, the logistic wherewithal to do that. I'll say. Now, Nunavut is the only territory, the only province and territory that has had no cases.
Because there's no land access.
Well, right, exactly. So it's extremely remote. Well, a lot of it is extremely remote. Obviously, you can get flights to Iqaluit, but it is extremely remote. So that, yeah, it's not a surprise that there are no cases. But, you know, the fact that they, like you said, there was some proactiveness there in realizing that they had citizens that were living in other areas of the country, and they needed to do something to make sure that those people were protected as well.
That's a job well done. Like, considering to A, recognize it, B, implement it, and C, have the logistic know-how to do it. Like, that's a lot in a short time frame, right?
Yep.
Like, either they've pre-done it, like they already had a plan in place. Again, bravo. Or they did it quickly. Again, bravo. Either A or B, I'll take, is amazing. Job well done.
Yep. I'm going to go to the Yukon first before I go to the Northwest Territories, because these two are, they're not exactly the same, but they're closely tied to each other. So in the Yukon, the government has introduced a new program to help out renters and landlords. What will happen is that the government will pay rent on the tenant's behalf directly to the landlord if the tenant has lost 30% or more of their income.
Oh.
Okay. Now, it has to be non-subsidized housing. So their aim is to cover at least 50% of whatever the median market rent is for April to June, which the numbers come out to $415 for a bachelor, or I guess this is up to $415 for a bachelor, $500 for a one-bedroom, $600 for a two-bedroom, and $800 for a three-plus bedroom. And yeah, so the way this will work is that, like I said, the landlord will be paid it directly, so the money won't go to the tenant to pay the rent. The money will go to the landlord without touching the tenant's hands. But I guess it's the tenant. The tenant applies for it.
Yeah, it's best that it goes that route, so that way the landlord gets the money,
right?
Essentially.
Kudos to the Yukon. Meanwhile, in the Northwest Territories, the Premier of the Northwest Territories has rejected an appeal by the Chamber of Commerce for a temporary block on commercial evictions.
So he said no?
Yes.
Huh.
So apparently, commercial landlords will be allowed to evict commercial tenants if they are not paying their rent. Now, the interesting part to this, in reading this article, is that apparently the majority of landlords in the Northwest Territories, now I don't think it's specified whether this was majority of commercial or residential or just majority of all landlords in the Northwest Territories, are actually international real estate investment trusts, and that their quote-unquote anchor tenants are predominantly government offices.
Well, that's just bizarre. But so
the government's not going to have problem paying their rent. The government will pay their rent, and these REITs, the landlords, are probably, by the sounds of it, are going to make their money, or are going to make a profit regardless, because it sounds like there's quite a number of vacant commercial properties anyways. But they're going to make their money because they're collecting so much rent from the government. But the government is perfectly okay to say, yeah, whatever. If small businesses can't pay their rent, then they can be evicted. Whatever.
My attitude towards this entire thing should be, where do you pay your taxes? Mm-hmm. And wherever you pay your taxes, if it's in Canada, you get all the benefits in the world. If it's not in Canada, you're not getting our money.
Yeah.
That's it. It should be very simple. So if a landlord in Northwest Territories is paying taxes in Canada and they want to evict because they're losing money,
right,
they should be allowed to. If they're an overseas one, no, too bad. Sorry about your luck.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is, if you're not paying and you're getting evicted, yeah, I can see it being bad. Never mind. I was like, nah, it'd be fine. You can evict, just go somewhere else. No, it's not exactly that easy. It's not like a job. No, Northwest Territories. That's odd that the Premier would do that.
Yeah.
Very odd. They're not as political as you would get further south, though, too, which is even more bizarre. You don't have a Jason Kenney in the Northwest Territories, I'll say.
Right. Ontario. All right. I'm going to start with the funny ones first. Maybe they're funny, maybe they're not. We'll see. So, you know how everybody was outraged about Justin Trudeau going to Harrington Lake back on Easter weekend and so on and so forth. So then it turns out, we found out over the last couple of weeks that Doug Ford also visited his cottage on Easter weekend, but apparently it was just to check the plumbing.
Way worse.
Way worse.
Here's the difference, okay? You can make the argument that Justin Trudeau went from his place of work, where he always is, like he's at 24 Sussex, and that's basically where he works all the time. That's where he's doing everything.
Yep.
And he went to see his family at their secondary location.
Mm-hmm.
You can make that argument. Now, some people say, no, he went to his cottage and he went over top or over the board. Fine. But there's a little bit of gray area. There's no gray area with Dougie going up north.
No.
And he didn't go by himself. It would be different if he went by himself.
Well, he said for the Easter weekend one, he did go by himself.
But he's not back.
No. He's back from the cottage. From then, what then happened was I think what you're thinking of is on Mother's Day. They had family come over to the house. In Toronto, They had family come over to the house to celebrate Mother's Day, including family that does not live in the house with them. So they are two different situations.
Yes. So
either way, they're kind of they both don't look good. They both don't look good.
You can't sit there and say, don't go to your cottage and then go to your cottage.
Yeah.
Like, I understand the desire to check your plumbing. I get that. But you can't tell other people not to do the same because they're going to do the same.
Yeah. And
you have to be the example. He did do a good job of making it as covert as possible because it didn't get found out right away.
Yes.
Which I give him, tip my hat to him, that way. But still, Dougie, come on. You're supposed to be the one I really like now. And you do this. Oftentimes, politicians and people in general, they put guidelines, rules, and laws not because they think that people will follow those, but because they're trying to lower the degree. Mm-hmm. So if you put a speed limit at 100, people are going to travel 110, 120. And if you know that you want people to travel 110, 120, you put the speed limit at 100 for that reason, because people don't follow the rules. And this is the reality situation. So if you want people to minimize their cottage travel, one, as premier, you can't go to your cottage. Two, you need to make it very clear that, if you go to your cottage, you could be fined.
Yeah.
Right? If you go to your cottage by yourself and you do all the stuff that needs to be done and you're one person, is someone going to come by with an enforcement law? Probably not. If there's your entire family at the cottage, you should be fined.
Mm-hmm.
And fined heavily. And I've seen people being fined in our city for people being meandering around different places. So, which I was very happy to see because, oh, wow, that's good.
Okay, next. I said it was the funny ones, and then obviously the cottage thing was not necessarily funny.
Well, the cottage one was just, Ducky, what are you doing?
Yeah, exactly.
Come on, Doug.
All right. So our Minister of Education, Stephen Leachy, tweets out a Zoom meeting photo with grade 6 children, which included the names of the children and the school that they went to, not censored.
Now,
he has since deleted the tweet and then recreated it with the names blurred out. But
he made a mistake.
He did make a mistake. It was, I know. This was
and it's just funny because
yes,
he's trying to push online stuff and he doesn't understand online. Yeah. It's the irony that flows from him. I will admit that Stephen Leachy has done a pretty good job during this COVID-19 thing.
Yeah,
considering other progressive or conservative ministers in other provinces, Alberta, haven't done as well.
Yes,
I'll give him props.
Yeah, fair enough.
But too funny.
Yeah, I mean, you have to admit the fact that COVID-19 came along, all the rhetoric that he was spouting online came to an end, and miraculously, the contracts with the different teachers unions got completed, or at least got to the point with preliminary completions. I guess they still had to be voted on, but it's wow. Imagine that. If you spent the time negotiating instead of spewing government rhetoric online 24 hours a day, something might get done.
Well, I think I will admit that probably both sides, to a degree, realized the last thing anybody wants to hear about is our bickering.
Oh, yeah. So now that we've got past those things, so the big deal for Ontario, and again, this is one of those things that could very easily be a larger topic, is the fact that disability and welfare recipients do feel like they're falling through the cracks during the whole COVID-19 situation because there's already been an issue in the sense that the funding that they receive from the government is barely enough to make ends meet as it is. It sounds like the average person that's on disability makes less money than the average senior. And there's been plenty of seniors out there that have been complaining about, obviously the cost of things going up and not being able to afford their basic necessities. And disability recipients are in a worse position. So as a comparison, someone who has lost their work as a result of COVID-19 can apply for the CERB and get the $2,000 a month. But for ODSP in particular, so the Ontario Disability Support Program, top-up that's been provided by the government is equivalent to $100 per person per month for the months of March to July. Now, the maximum amount that somebody makes on ODSP already for 2020 is $1,169 a month for a single person. So they get bumped up to $1,269, which, okay, it's a little bit more money. And those people aren't working, so they're obviously not eligible for CERB because they weren't working necessarily. It's possible that some of them were, and they wouldn't be making as much on ODSP because of that. But let's say the people that are getting the maximum, they're not working. And some people would say, yeah, but the disability payments aren't taxable. And it's like, you're right, they're not taxable. But even when you consider the tax that someone is likely paying on the CERB, someone on the CERB is making more money than somebody on disability. So there probably needs to be some sort of adjustment or correction to the disability system to ensure that the people that are on disability are at least able to have their basic needs met without needing support from other family members and things like that.
I'll say it this way. That kind of a topic is not necessarily because of COVID-19.
No, exactly.
What they get paid, and that goes back to universal income and things like that, what they get paid is dependent on circumstance and things like that, because you can go on ODSP for back problems, and some people are perpetual ODSP users. So their parents are on it, their uncles are on it, their kids are on it, everyone's because of their back problems. Realistically, they just don't want to work and they want to get paid for ODSP. Now, there are some people with specific disability and other things that need to be taken into consideration, and obviously, maybe they aren't getting paid enough, but the CERB was put in quickly and broadly.
Yes.
So it's not perfect, and there's no way it could be. Mm-hmm. So complaining about it, yeah, you may think that it's not fair, but guess what? I'm sorry, like some of these people were making more than $2,000 a month.
Right. Oh yeah. Yep.
So they have structures in place that are over $2,000 a month. So what I mean by that is, like, they pay a certain amount for their house. They pay a certain amount for different living expenses. Mm-hmm. They weren't expecting this. Like, this isn't something, where, let's say you were a manager at some business that closed down. It doesn't matter what it is.
Well, let's say like a factory of some sort, right?
Yeah, let's say you're a factory and you're making $80K per year. $2,000 is barely going to cover your expenses that you've built up because you have more monthly expenses. You've lived this lifestyle because you have no reason to think that you're going to lose that job.
Yeah. Yep.
Now, some people say, well, you should have a retirement fund. Yeah, good. Yeah. Like, how many Canadians have the 3 months rainy day fund? Zero?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, like, your expenses are high. So, yeah, you're not like that guy across the street that's, was working at minimum wage at a factory. Yeah, he's getting $2,000 and he thinks it's a windfall. But not everyone is in that same category. A lot of people aren't.
Nope. Yeah, exactly.
So, and that's why it was blanketed.
Yep.
Right? They didn't care about your income at the time. They just said $2,000. Here you go. Figure it out. As much as I want to say, yeah, I feel bad for a lot of people, not just people on disability.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Federal government. Here we go. Our federal government. So let's start with a couple of funny things, because they should be hopefully be very quick. Justin Trudeau introduces the hashtag Canada Homework Help on Twitter, and conservative trolls immediately destroy it because they don't like nice things.
Well, yeah. Well, Justin Trudeau has as many haters as he does likers, I think.
Yeah, probably. Probably. Michelle Rempel-Garner, who is the Conservative MP for Calgary-Nose Hill, releases a fundraising video on Facebook for her constituents, talking about the possibility of a snap election in the fall. However, she's been in Oklahoma since this thing started because that's where her husband lives.
Yeah, I love MPs from Alberta. They're awesome.
She's taken on the moniker from obvious non-supporters online as being the MP for Calgary, Oklahoma. So
I like that.
Yeah. The federal government introduces a new gun ban. We're not even going to go down that route because we've talked about it before, and I know that it's only going to make you angry. So I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
What? What do you mean it's going to make me angry?
It's going to make you angry.
Let me quote this. It doesn't do anything.
Yes, I know. It doesn't do.
And what the guy in Nova Scotia did didn't have any impact on what was banned.
Right.
It's a useless bill.
Right.
All right, I'm done.
Okay, good. All right. The Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy is not attracting nearly as many applicants as the government expects, possibly because it took so long for it to get implemented. And by the time it got implemented, many people were already laid off and businesses were closed, and they were not willing to go into the process of starting back up to get their employees back on the books so that they could get the subsidy from the government.
I give the federal government a pass on this because, one, it's a logistical nightmare. 2, they did what they could.
Yep.
And 3, I understand businesses not wanting to start back up. Like, I get it. All this, I give them passes for. The only thing that you could say would be a problem is the fact that it wasn't something that was already in place in case of emergency, like break glass and use.
I guess
that's the only thing you could say.
I guess,
but that's it.
I guess if there's any positives to it, is that what they could do is, the program will eventually wind down. But at least then they have a program in place that if something does happen again, they can say, well, we already had this program and we know what worked and what didn't. And if we take the time to rework it to make sure that things do work, if we do come across a situation where we have to implement it again, then we can. And we can implement it a lot faster.
There's a lot of things we can learn from this, right?
That's
and
right.
that's one of the things that we can learn.
Yeah.
So they didn't do it in quick enough time. Yeah, I get it.
Yep.
Yeah, I understand.
So now a couple of...
They tried, they failed. It's okay.
Yep.
Still get a pass by me. You tried it. It didn't work as well as... I shouldn't say you failed. It didn't work as well as you wanted to, but you still get a pass.
Yeah. Just for some quick numbers things. So the government had expected about 1 million applications from businesses for the wage subsidy. And as of the 12th of May, there had only been 132,000 applications. So... just a little over 1/10 of what they were expecting. And then meanwhile, the CERB applications are to date double of what they expected. They were expecting about 4 million applications, and they've received over 8 million applications.
Shocking that people would rather not work than work.
Well, I think it's also it's not only people would prefer not to work as opposed to work, but I think it's also businesses realized that they were in a position that they couldn't afford to keep staff on and wait to see what the government was going to be able to provide for them.
Oh yeah, I shouldn't say that blanket,
right?
I shouldn't say this blanket statement because I'm the person that got laid off from one job that I may have kept had the 30% thing rule in place, and ended up getting another job.
Right.
So, I guess
I think there's, and this is going to lead into the last topic, but I think there are plenty of people that would rather work than not.
Yeah.
Right? In general. I mean, again, under the circumstances, because of safety and health and things like that, and realizing like who you're living with and whatever, I can understand that there's maybe more people that are like, well, it makes more sense for me to stay home because I don't want to get my wife sick, or I've got my elderly parent living with me and I don't want them to get sick. And like, I can understand under those circumstances. However, Andrew Scheer, in the last week and a half, has not only called CERB recipients lazy, but he's also claimed that some of them may be fraudsters.
Well, I'll put it this way. He may not be wrong with the first statement for some.
Okay.
And the second one may also be true. However, how does that help in any way, shape, or form?
Right.
Like, an example I'll give you is that in World War II, there was rations handed out, and you got your card and you went and got it. And Churchill knew that there were people that were frauding the system and creating counterfeits, and he didn't punish those people because he knew that it wasn't good for the morale of the population to call them out or to go after them.
Right.
Scheer, you're trying to lead,
for now,
lame duck lead. But
yes.
You're trying to do something. Calling people out for being lazy, you're not inspiring anybody. Like you call me lazy, it's not gonna be like, oh, sure, call me lazy. I better get back to work.
Right.
It's not gonna happen. So you need to have measured responses. Now, you don't necessarily have to have Trudeau's measured responses that I've had or heard about, where it's like, hey, just what color's your tie? Well, you see, I want to first thank the healthcare workers. They've done a fantastic job. And I want to let you know that a lot of people, time, care, and energy went into making this tie. And I want to congratulate all the Canadians that have participated in electing me and making sure that they are best represented by the color of this tie, which is a slight shade of light blue, but it's also indicative of all Canadians across the country. Like, I get you may not want to have that kind of a measured response, but you know, you want to have something.
So
as if I just ran that off too.
I know that was good. Hey, you know, you had the right level of uhs and ums in there too. So
right?
You're good. You're all right.
Yeah,
so,
loosely speaking.
Yeah. So I want to go with the fraud side of it. Because I've talked to some clients about this, and I've said the fact that, you know what, when this is all over, there's going to be auditing. The reason why the CRA is the one that's managing most of these programs is because they are the arm of the government that ensures that the government makes its money, and so they are going to go after people. And fraud. I guess if there is fraudulent activity in it, they'll go after those people. I don't know how much fraudulent activity there would be per se, so much as people that, and I guess depending on how you look at fraud, there's people that have likely applied for, let's say, the CERB that are not eligible. Okay. Now, if you want to call that fraud, if there's ignorance, if like whatever it happens to be, because there's going to be some people that applied for it because they felt like they were eligible based on the guidelines that they read, and then it's going to turn out that because of X, Y, and Z, they were not eligible, and they'll owe the money back to the government. So, I mean, I guess it depends on how you want to define fraud, but like one of the arguments, apparently, as quote unquote anecdotal evidence from the head of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, was that he said he received an email from somebody where the guy has a neighbor who's a farmer that has some horses, and apparently was able to apply for the CERB under his horse's name.
That's one case.
Right.
Let's pretend that it did happen on one case. That is such anecdotal evidence that it's incredible that you would bother to take the time.
Right.
You should be crucified for your lack of factual knowledge. Like, you should be raked over the coals for trying to say that this is fact.
And he basically did. He ended up having to walk back his statement. Kind of walked it back, I guess. You know,
he still believes it. He just wants to have some circumstantial evidence. Like,
well, right.
Can't possibly, like, even if 1% of the population is fraudulent, you still do this.
Yes.
Like,
and
what are you trying to tell you? Like, I don't understand where's the logic? You don't want them to do this?
Right. Exactly.
Like, is that what you're trying to say? Because you're trying, it's a meaning behind it. So explain the meaning.
Well,
like, what's your alternative?
So, for instance, they're saying, so the Conservatives are currently saying there is approximately 200,000 fraudulent claims. Now,
Sure.
I previously said that there have been 8 million applications. So we are talking about, what are we talking about? We are talking about 2.5% of the overall applications that may or may not be fraudulent. So you want the process to be held up for the other 97.5% of people that applied for the program, because 2.5% of the claims might be fraudulent. So we have to go after the fraudulent claims before we make sure that another person gets a penny.
7.8 million people on hold because of 200,000 people.
Right. This is why
we can get after.
Right. And this is why the CRA is administering the program, because when the program is over, the CRA will audit. And the CRA will get a lot of money back.
Yeah, even if I will say it this way, even if the 2.5%, they never collect a dime from it.
Yeah.
I am still okay with it.
Yeah.
I am still perfectly okay with it. Because this was a reality when it was first brought out. Like, if you had told me, well, there's 2%, there might be 2 to 3% error. Okay. Do it.
Yeah.
How about you go after the whatever percentage it is of people that are in the upper echelon that don't pay their taxes? And then we can talk about that,
right?
The person with the tax federation. Let's go after those people first, before you go after the people in the CERB.
It's also rich that, you know, it's Andrew Scheer that is holding a press conference and basically calling people fraudsters, and, you know, he's the one that used party money to pay for his kids' school tuition and bought a van and you know, all these different things. You know, whatever.
You're correlating two things I don't think should be correlated.
I guess.
But I will say that the person from the Tax Federation
Yes.
complaining about fraudulent accounts from a horse, you need to get real.
I know.
Because that person, let's say if those numbers are accurate, those people would not be a drop in the hat compared to the amount of fraudulent activity that comes from the top. So don't start.
Yeah. Well, sir, that has been cross-country checkup.
Should have chose a shorter topic, kid. Have fun editing this.
Oh, that's okay. I knew it was going to take a while, and it's a long weekend, so I have more time. All right. So, anyways, I guess that's the end of our little discussion here, our catch up on what's been going on across the country. So, thanks for listening. My name's Adam.
My name's Mike.
And we'll talk to you soon.